G'day folks, I'm Wren, they, them, and let's talk about some queer poetry books. So I'm back with another 5 Friday, and this time I'm going to be recommending 5 queer poetry books. I really love poetry. I remember not loving it when I was a kid, but as I got older, it just... there's something just so beautiful about poetry. And when you find some that really work for you, it's fantastic. So here are 5 poetry books that are by queer authors and feature queer topics, I guess you could call it. But I think they're all highly amazing, and I think you should read these ones as well as anything else these poets have written, and just explore some other queer poetry because you might find out you really like it. Up first is an all-time favourite of mine, and that is Walking with Ghosts by Q. Lee Driscoll. This is so good. So Q. Lee Driscoll is a Cherokee Two-Spirit queer writer and activist, also of African, Irish, Lenape, Lumbee, and Osage ascent. I think there's a few different pronouns that are used for Q. Lee on the back here. Yeah, this poetry collection is really hard-hitting, honestly. Like, there are a lot of poems in here that are just about being queer, that are about being indigenous, that are about nature. But the thing that really struck me about this, and something I actually did a university project on, was that a lot of the poems in here are written about hate crimes that have been committed against queer people. Yeah, there's... I can't say the names of some of these because they are triggering to say the least. Yeah, there's this one at the end that I really love because, like, there's so many in here that are about queer hate crimes that I then researched for the project that I did for this. And yeah, they're all like, there were real news articles about these people who, I think all of them had been tortured and killed because they were queer, and just how horrendous that was that nothing was done about it. And that's just severely messed up. But this one at the back, called Book of Memory, says, for all victims of hate crimes and for those of us who survive. Like, I wish I could read so many of these to you. Like, it's really heartbreaking reading some of these and knowing that these things have happened to people. And these poems are Q. Lee's way of healing that within themselves and a way to address that with other people, because there were some accounts in here that I had heard of. There was a few that I wish I hadn't heard of because they're horrific, but there were also a bunch in here that I had never heard of until this poetry collection. And that's just something really random that I love about poetry. It can really introduce you to a lot of topics that you might not know about. Yeah, there's one for Marsha P. Johnson as well. Yes, so the one of the poems in here that got really popular is called Grandmother Spider's Lesson for an Urban Indian Queer. It's really cool. I love the way that Q. Lee's poetry is really deep-rooted in who they are as a person, and even though they are writing these poems about other people, you can tell that it's written by this poet. And I think that says a lot to the way that Q. Lee is able to use the written word in as if it's an instrument. Like, it's fascinating. I love this so much, and I want everyone to read it. So please go read it. Next up is Exactly As I Am by Ray White. This poetry collection definitely took me by surprise. This was written by an Australian non-binary poet, which, so cool. I read it and fell absolutely in love with it because as a non-binary person myself, just the things that Ray would write about, I was like, how do you know this? Because I felt those same things. And there's something really connective about that. And that's, again, something I love about poetry, is that it can connect people. And, you know, even though, like, Ray and I have had very different lives and, you know, we share this one tiny thing of our gender identity and we don't even view it the exact same way, but we still have these shared experiences. Phenomenal. Like, not every single poem in there was about being non-binary. You know, Ray has a lot of different other queer identities about them, and you know, they speak about those as well. So like, yeah, those ones might not have resonated with me as much, but they were still phenomenal poems. And the way that Ray was able to write these poems, like, it's so different from Culey's writing style, and that's amazing. I feel like Ray has a really kind of contemporary way of spinning words, and it's just a phenomenal poetry collection, and I can't wait to reread it. I need it so badly. Next up, we have Homie by Danez Smith. I remember being so blown away by this collection when I first read it, and like, for some of the most random things. Okay, the one that really got me, and I was like, how is this a thing? But it's a poem called Rose, and it's just about like this kid that went to school with Danez. Well, I'm assuming that's what the story is kind of saying. And this kid has red cheeks. Like, they have rosacea, and I was like, oh my god. Just, like, the most random thing to pick out of this poetry collection was about some random kid that had red cheeks, because I also have red cheeks, and I really struggled with that as a kid. And the fact that it was just randomly in here, amazing. But again, the way that Danez writes, completely different to the other two poets that I talked about. And that's just, it's so cool. I really love the way that Danez writes. There's something so almost like lyrical, but not in that like kind of airy-fairy kind of way. Just in the, like, there's a beat. There's a beat to these words, and you can follow that rhythm, and it really sucks you in, and everything flows. Like, it's all really kind of fast-paced poetry, I would say. And like, I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but if you read it and feel like it's fast-paced, please let me know, because that's just what I got from it. And so funny, there was, yeah, self-portrait as a 90s R&B video. Like, reading that was so funny, because 90s R&B videos went way harder than they needed to, and it's glorious. But I love that poetry can do stuff like this, where it's written in such a different way, and the way that poets can tell this whole other story with just the way they format the page. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I think this is a really, really good poetry collection. Like, not just speaking about being queer, but also about being Black, and how those two things are separate but are also combined to create this whole, you know, picture of who Danez is and how they've gone through life. Yeah, I love that it says part friendship diary, part bright elegy, part war cry. That's a very good synopsis of what this is about. The next poetry collection I want to talk about is IRL by Tommy Pico. There's this like little trilogy kind of Tommy Pico poetry collections. There's also Junk and Nature Poem. I read IRL first, and I remember the exact moment in time when I was reading this, because I listened to it. It was the first audio poetry I had ever kind of consumed. I highly recommend listening to poetry audibly, especially when it's narrated by the poet. Like, the way they say their words, it adds a whole new level to the poetry, and it sucks you in. And I just felt like I was in this bubble, and all I could hear was Tommy Pico's voice saying these words. And like, I had no idea what IRL was about, none at all. I just randomly started listening to it one day, and it surprised me when it was queer, because I was like, pretty sure this person is of the male persuasion, is talking about having sex with another person of male persuasion. And I had to like stop what I was doing, and I was like analyzing everything, and I was like, what is happening? Is this what I think it is? Am I reading too much into it? No, I was not. It's definitely queer. I feel like a lot of what Tommy Pico was talking about had that 90s kind of grungy kind of way about it. When I was listening to it, I could imagine being in New York in the 90s on a subway, surrounded by a bunch of random people, and like just big coat, big jeans, my own little world, feeling like everyone kind of hates me. I don't know why that's the vibe that I got from it, but I did. If you've read it, let me know if you get the same kind of vibe. But I also did kind of get like, again 90s, but in like Miami vibes. Two very different vibes. One kind of dark and grungy, one golden and hypersexualized. But both worked very well together. And then number 5, we have Wren, an LGBT reimaginings of Scottish folklore by Rachel Plummer. I love this. This is also really beautiful because there's artwork in it. But this is what it says. So it is queer poems that are based off of Scottish folklore. So yeah, we've got the Kelpie. Yep, Selkies. We have a lot of different queer imaginings of some of these things as well. Like, love that. There's like 2 Loch Ness poems, and like in one, the Loch Ness was this like butch lesbian character, and then in another of the Loch Ness stories, the Loch Ness was non-binary, and both were amazing. And it was like, you can imagine these things being 100% real. You don't need to know this folklore before you go into it. It does a relatively good job of explaining these folklorish things. Like, we got brownies. I love brownies. Oh, changelings. And yeah, there's a lot. Oh, the ghillie doo. But yeah, so it's all queer in all different kinds of queer ways. Like, yeah, we have lesbian rep, we have non-binary rep, trans rep, gay rep. There's so many different queer identities in here. And so there is also a glossary in the back that goes a little bit further into these folklores. I love the back of this. So it says, a boy selkie who takes girlishness off like a seal skin. That's cool. An untamable kelpie, the warrior wife of a princess, and a Loch Ness monster who is too busy having fun to worry about words like girl or boy. This is the way the world is, with just a bit of Scottish myth and magic thrown in. So I highly recommend this. It's such a beautiful collection. Not just the words, but also the imagery in it as well. And it's also just such a good time. Because like, there are definitely some creatures in here that you're like, I heard of you before. But to see them in this new way, it's really like uplifting. Even if some of them are a little bit on the darker side, the poems themselves just have this really kind of like energetic kind of feel to them. So they're a really beautiful collection. What can I say? So that is going to be it for this round of 5 Friday with those 5 poetry collections. As I said in the beginning, please check out all the other things that these poets have written. They've all written so many things, and I highly recommend all of them. If you have any poetry, specifically queer poetry recommendations for me, leave them down below. I would love to read more of them. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.